might have to refocus it here. Try one more time. Alright. From the tube.
And we want to be recording?
Yeah, it should be recording, because I think that's the only way that it will process the... Make sure it's going back there.
Yeah, it's going.
Cool.
I don't know how good the quality is.
It'll give you like a stream quality.
It says poor again.
Poor again. I don't get it. Alright, here it is. Alright. We're back. Alright. Yeah, I can see. So guys, tell us this time if it sounds better. I think I got the issue worked out as far as the audio is concerned. So we should be solid. And I have the stream here. Okay. All right. It looks like people are coming back. Looks like everything. I don't know. Let's wait a second to see that this is not, the internet didn't go crazy again and shut everybody off. Sounds good. Okay, Ryan, that's good. How about the video? Is it choppy this time? Is it coming in 1080 or at least 720? Audio sounds terrific. Okay, that's good. We figured out the mic thing. Audio's good. How about video though? Ryan, can you confirm that it looks like it's coming in like a 720-ish quality? All right. All right. I think we're good-ish at this point. All right, 1080. Then I'll take it.
We're back.
All right. So I just want to reiterate, because we kind of had a break in the middle of this due to internet quality. It turns out that we have to put, even though we have this like giant lead coming from the OBS software that does the broadcasting for a live stream through a physical camera, the computer has to be like almost out of the garage in order to collect the internet signal and then transmit in here. So we figured that part out. But what we were talking about before was pedalboard best practices. Looks like there's already some people that are joining us on Instagram and talking about buffers, cables, power supplies, all things pedalboard. Our goal is to, get our stuff together and do this every week, preferably on a Wednesday, because I have a little extra help on the video side those days, so that we can have somebody kind of helping add in the questions and stopping me when I'm getting out of hand. So the idea here is, talking things about pedalboards, talking about pedals, what's working, what's not, what you have questions about, wherever those things are. We want to try to kind of take about an hour and spend this time kind of answering those questions. So I got some here coming in on my phone that I'm seeing coming through, so I'll answer those. We also have some people that are following us on Instagram. If you want to follow us on Instagram or follow along there, because the feed here is not good for some reason, that's at Vertex Effects, so you can join us there. But let's start with some questions this time on our friends on Instagram. So what do we got, Mason?
Yes, we got Ivan S 750 Sebi.
Oh yeah, Ivan S 750. Yeah.
He's asking about your thoughts on revival drive into like a cab sim and then direct to front of house.
I think that's cool. I think it's good if you have if you can't use a lot of pedals and you just need to use those few things. That's what Rhett Scholl's using, a small one, and he's using that into the Line 6 HX Stomp, and then that at times will just go XLR in. So I think it's a great option if you don't have the ability to use an amp or anything like that. But tube amps are pretty cheap. I don't know what the price is on the Revival Drive, but you can get a used Hot Rod DeVille or Deluxe for about $400. So you might be close there, unless you just can't use an amp for whatever reason. Let's see. There's a question. It's either Steven or Stefan Cano. Do you have any suggestions on a second tier on a Pedal Train Pro like Rhett, Strymon, Bridge? I think that it's hard to do that because of the pitch, and so you'd have to be careful on something like that. I think that they do make kind of like tiers that you can buy for a pedal train, but my fear is unless you somehow got the tier to pitch the same pitch as your actual pedal train itself, it might just be awkward and add a lot of height. And if you're using one of those pedal train cases or one of the pedal train soft gig bags, it would sit up probably too high. So it's really, those were designed with the idea and the intent of using it on a flat pedalboard surface. But I'm sure that the guys over at Fixed Pedalboards would build one for you if you requested it, and maybe they'd have a better idea than me about how to accommodate that. But I don't typically build on pedal train pedalboards, so I have less experience on problem solving on those, at least off the top of my head. Let's go to one on Instagram if we got it.
Yeah, Tanner James asks.
Oh, Tanner.
How can I use a DS1 for fuzz?
DS1 for fuzz? Put the gain at max, I guess. And then if that's not enough gain, you could always put a boost in front of it and see if you get into fuzz territory. But you probably want to turn that tone knob down, because it can get a little bit shrill if you get a little too much. Alright, let's see. Ryan, I've been setting up a board for years, but haven't jumped into the MIDI game. I run a EFX LE and an H9 and a tonal recall, but don't understand MIDI. Any future plans on an in-depth lesson on MIDI? I haven't planned to do an in-depth lesson on MIDI, mostly because for a lot of people, I think it would just put them to sleep. And I guess like the question I have for you, and this might be valuable for me if we ever did one, is like, what is it that you're looking for? Because each device or each switcher kind of has its own MIDI programming secrets. So I don't know how universal it would be if we're trying to do it device, or in terms of device, I mean like switcher by switcher, they're each going to have their own way of doing that. So if you could kind of clarify either in the questions here or an email about what exactly you would want, I could definitely, I'm not saying no, I just want to make sure that I understand exactly what you're asking so I can figure out how we can apply that to kind of more universally to people that are watching the channel and trying to get more out of it. So let me know about that one. You got any more here?
Yeah, we got a couple. So, Bryce Warden says, my Arion Landau course is quite noisy, even on the Zuma. Any tips? Tried it in many different configurations and still get some noise.
Well, analog choruses are going to have some noise to them, and it's just sort of the nature of using the Bucket Brigade chips in the way that they're made. Now, there is on the Landau chorus, which is for those of you who don't know, that was a modded chorus pedal based on an Arion SCHZ that we were then kind of gutting and redoing. There's a gain control underneath the input, so you want to make sure that you're at unity gain, because if you're boosting beyond that, you're just adding more noise floor. The other thing is try it on a battery, see if there's any difference, because the most isolated power supply you can get is a 9-volt battery. Obviously not all pedals take them, but I know that this one does because I made these. See if you notice any difference in terms of the noise. If you don't notice any difference in terms of the noise there, then that's sort of like the minimum noise floor that you can get into. Now, what you'd have to get into then is you'd have to start substituting potentially different Bucket Brigade chips, seeing if you can find one that's quieter, because there are some variations in that. Sometimes the JRC chip that's in there, that's kind of the part of the preamp section, sometimes those can be a little bit noisy, so you could try something else. You could try something that's like a lower noise, higher quality kind of Burr Brown thing, but it might change the tone some. So I don't know whether you'd want to get into doing that, but I would say try that first and then report back and let us know. Let's see, what we got here. Let's see, what do you think about the MXR ISO bricks versus the CS12? You always mention the CS12, but I never heard you say anything about the MXR despite the price. Well, Well, the MXR ones are cool. It's sort of a similar idea to how the guys at Strymon do the supplies, where they actually have the switching supply happening off the board or off of the power supply itself, and then it comes in to the power supply and then does all of the isolation from there. Um, I don't have anything against using them. I know that a lot of people use them effectively. I just don't think that it's quite as robust of an enclosure. Like when I look at the CS12, it reminds me of the old like Voodoo Lab pedal power series, except it's a switching supply. So it's a little bit. It provides more power than what the Voodoo Labs ones would with equivalent size, and there's not as much concern around noise because you don't have the toroid transformers. And even though they are supposedly toroid, they're kind of more semi-toroid, so they don't completely noise reject. In some of the larger power supplies that have more current, they go to aluminum enclosures instead of steel, and so they don't do as much to shield against electromagnetic fields that the transformers emit naturally. So I like the CS12 for that reason. Let's go to one over here.
Alright, so Ralpheus asks, Robin Ford Reverb, what's his secret, amp or pedal?
He uses the TC Electronics and all that since I've been working with him, and he used the Flint for a while as well. But those are the only two that I've seen him use, and of course the Dumble doesn't have any reverb, so it's always coming from a pedal. But he always gets a great reverb sound, and still seems to sound great even with kind of a more. He has like a nice reverb sound, and then like a nice 222 millisecond delays, like with kind of like a slap delay with reverb, and that was like his signature sound. I always thought was the 222 second or millisecond delay. So think about that if you want Robin Ford, have an analog slapback, 222 milliseconds, nice little plate reverb. That's the Robin Ford type thing. All right, let's go here. Solid state amps. What do you think takes pedals well? The Quilter stuff actually is great. We've done some cool videos with in collaboration with Quilter, maybe a year or so ago, or a little more than that, where we were kind of trying to get some iconic tones just using our pedals through the 101 reverb from Quilter, and they sounded really good. I thought, like, you can go watch those videos. They're on our channel. I think we called it Tone Tasting or something like that. And we tried some John Mayer stuff. We tried some Eric Clapton stuff. We tried some Jimmy Page stuff. And, I'm sure you can listen to it and be like, well, it would have sounded better if they had used a Marshall, or it would have sounded better if they used a Dumble, or whatever. But it sounded really close. And I thought they sounded really good, more importantly. And they're their own thing, but they're great, and they're small, and they're compact. And I think that they build a really good quality product, and they stand behind that product. And I think that as far as the solid state stuff is concerned, you can't certainly get any smaller or better quality than what they're doing over there at Quilter. So check out those ones. And they have a new one that's like a 200 watt channel switching one that's pretty cool. What we got over here, Mason?
So Tanner James asks, as a pedalboard builder, what do you find is the most difficult problem you face day to day?
Well, I should preface this by saying that I'm not really a pedalboard builder like the guys that, really do this for a living. I just do the couple of pedalboards that I do every month for the purposes of teaching specific things on the YouTube channel. So I build very few now comparatively to what I did, say, 6 or 8 years ago. But I would say the general issue that I experience, and I think that a lot of guys experience, if I were to be so bold as to speak for them, as I'm just presuming to do now, is that usually people are not great editors of the sounds that they actually need, and that's sort of the advice that I always talk to any prospective person that wants to build a pedal board about, paring down to the necessities. Because one thing that I experienced a lot especially when I was building a lot of pedal boards, and that was what I was doing for a living before I even did pedals as a standalone thing, is that everybody's eyes were always bigger than their stomach. So they always had an idea that they wanted to have everything available at the flick of a button, and invariably they would come back to me 6 months later disappointed that they bit off too much and they needed to consolidate. So the ability to be able to kind of self-edit before you get to the process of building a board or bringing it to somebody to build it for you is really, really be, as rigorous as you can with yourself, be honest about what you actually really use 90% of the time and build the board around that, because then you end up with all these superfluous things. You end up with these big boards and you're not really using the majority of those pedals, and then you end up saying to yourself, well, why am I lugging around this 40 or 50 pound rig and I'm only using 50% of it, or fill in the blank percentage of it that's less than a majority. So I'd say that's one thing that I would caution people who are considering this endeavor to consider. I'm going to go back over here. Let's see. Favorite looper companies. I know you often use the Boss ones, but loopers. So I think Campfire Guitar Star is talking about programmable MIDI switchers. I actually just did a video about this, so if you are considering programmable loopers or programmable MIDI switchers, I did a good rundown of kind of the top three in my opinion. I kind of focused more on the 6 to 8 or 5 to 7 loop varieties. So it was the Boss ES5, the Musicom Labs EFXLE, and then the RJM PBC6X. The RJM is the industry standard, I feel, in terms of its ability to program, the software, the quality, and the price. I mean, the PBC6X is kind of it's a deal for what it offers. And especially the programming is really designed for people that are doing this professionally, and they have to have scenes based on songs. The digital display is very, very easy to use, and it's very intuitive for players that are playing live, and the ability to be able to use presets in those ways is really, really it's really above anything else that's available out there. So I'd say if you want the best one, the Rolls Royce, certainly the RJM. The Musicom is one that I'm actually using on my own board. I don't require all of the necessities of that, and I prefer the buffering in the Musicom. The Musicom one has got the best buffer of all of them, but I'd say it's not quite as sophisticated, although very close to as sophisticated as the RJM, but the best one I think is still has to go to RJM, and then the Boss is the best value. It does a lot, has a lot of different options. The buffers in it aren't great, but for the price, it's what, $400 or something for the 5-loop one. I think you can't beat it for what it does at that price, so that's pretty incredible as far as Boss is concerned. We'll go back to Instagram.
How do you decide which pedals go in a loop when you're wiring a switcher?
Well, typically for when you're talking about a switcher, which pedals go in which loops, if you're talking about order, most of them it won't matter now because you can rearrange the order of any loop. But if you had hardwired loops that were dedicated to certain foot switches, I usually will, if it's, let's say there's more pedals than loops, I think that this might be where that person's going with this potentially. I would put any of the stuff that doesn't have the ability to be MIDI controlled in the loops, or if you have pedals that actually physically need to be manipulated, like say they have a second foot switch function or a tap tempo, those would need to be either outside of the loops or in a place where it's accessible off the board, because you need to be able to manipulate whatever that second foot switch is. If it's an additional function, again, on a pedal or a tap tempo or fill in the blank function that is not able to be encapsulated into the switcher. With guys like Rhett Shull, we used really small programmable loop switchers that only had 5 loops, and then we put all the MIDI stuff outside of that, and then we're controlling it with a MIDI switcher, because you don't need to have your MIDI controlled devices like your Strymon, Mobius, Big Sky, Timeline. You don't need to have those in loops in order to have the benefit of the MIDI programmability happening inside the switcher of your choice, and in Rhett's case it was the Boss ES5. So he was able to get a smaller switcher and still able to make the same MIDI commands and changes, even though he didn't have the Strymons hardwired into the board itself. SD, thank you for the $5. That's really cool. Winter NAMM, I will be there, but primarily only shooting videos. We're working out some collaborations with some other YouTubers, so I'll be around. But maybe we'll do some live streams or something like that, or do like a Vertex meetup somewhere. Let's see. If money wasn't a problem for a clean pedal platform amp between the Milkman or a Fender Deluxe Reverb, well, if you can get a vintage Fender Deluxe Reverb for most of the prices of some of the boutique clean amps, so I just get a vintage Fender because they never lose money. You get a Deluxe Reverb, you're never going to take a bath on that. You can get a Silverface kind of drip edge, like a late 60s Deluxe Reverb for maybe 15 to 1800. I'd be surprised if you could pick up an equivalent boutique version for that new. So I just say get yourself a vintage Fender, man. Those are the best clean amp platforms. I really love the Bandmasters. Super reverbs are cool. They're a little bit big to move. Deluxe reverbs are great. But I think like stuff like the Bandmaster is like a sleeper. Nobody buys them, and you can get them for like $500 or $600. Even a blackface version. I'd say go with those, man, because those sound incredible, and they're hand wired, all point to point. And a lot of people sleep on the Bandmaster, but I love them. Mid 60s Bandmaster, you can get those really inexpensively. Don't use the cabinets; those aren't great, but the heads are incredible and not expensive at all. Let's go to our friends on Instagram.
So, Ark Will Powell asks, what board would you recommend flying with? Been looking at the Schmidt Array, but they might be out of my price range.
Yeah, I wouldn't go that direction. I would use the flat surface pedal boards. I think that those are the best boards to use in terms of being able to have everything mounted topside, being able to get to everything for troubleshooting purposes. You can have Get Off My Case, which is the guys that we use for pretty much one of the flat pedal board surfaces that we use. But there's other people that make the same ones. But I'd say that rarely we'd have a hard time spending more than $150 on one of those. So they're pretty inexpensive, all handmade, and I think that's the best surface. And then you can go over to Fixed Pedal Boards and get your tiers if you need to have one of the Strymon bridges made. Those are all made custom, so you can just give them a size that you need and they'll make it for you. Or they have individual pedal size lifts and risers, so you could check those out. And I think that's the way to go. Let's see. Hey, let's see, Jonas said, you recently posted a picture of my new pedal board that has a boost and a Landau chorus. Thank you. As I have a big board, I am now wanting to make a fly rig board. What pedals do you recommend? Well, Jonas, I think you got to look at, what are your basic needs, and the hardest thing to get in a compact size is quality overdrives and distortions. So I think you kind of have to choose, like, well, what are going to be sort of the signature overdrives and distortions for the sound that you need or for the gig that you have. So kind of identify what those one or two things are, and then from there, then you can go and start to look at multi-effects units like the HX Stomp or things like that that can do a lot of things in a small, compact, relatively size box. So I would look at that, picking a couple of of your overdrive sounds that are analog, and then going into something that's like a multi-effects unit, and then maybe having an expression pedal that can do your volume controls, can do some of the speed changes for Leslie's or whatever it is. Mahia, one thing we'll have to reset this thing after 30 minutes because otherwise it'll kill the mic.
We're at 23.
Yeah, so we can we can probably just turn it off and turn it back on. I think it should work. And real quick, there it goes. All right, let's. Does it look okay there?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay. Let's go back to Instagram.
Alright, so Riley asked, what's the best cheap stereo chorus?
Oh yeah, somebody asked me this year. It must be the same person. Oh yeah, I see it. Best cheap stereo chorus. Well, those Arions, they're pretty cheap. Especially the Z versions that are made in Sri Lanka. Those are cool, but they're not very well made. Let's see, a good cheap one. Yeah, I'm gonna say the Arion SCHZ. I think that you get them for like $25 or something like that. They're made out of plastic and they're terribly made, but they sound great if you get them. If you get one that works, or if you can find an SCH1, even better. Those are great. Very cool. Let's see here. Okay, I'm about to hot rod my pedal train like you did in that video and have the dual lock and tie down mounts in the mail. What else do I need? I have power cables and power. You're gonna need wood screws, and you're gonna have to drill through the bottom like pilot holes in through the pedal train first. And these are just guides for the wood screws, because the wood screws are going to be what actually a 1/3 inch piece of composite that was laminated with Formica, which is like a countertop material that's just black. So you could go to Get Off My Case and just order the same one that we got, or you could go to a countertop place and see if they could make you a custom size, and then you could just paint the edges, because the top, if it's Formica, you should be able to get it in black, so you shouldn't have that issue. I think the bottom on ours was laminated with ABS, which is also something you could buy and laminate yourself if you needed to. But again, I think the price of the one that I got from Get Off My Case was like $50, so it was pretty inexpensive if you consider that you'd have to go and buy all those components separately and have them shipped to you. What do we got on Instagram?
Alright, so someone asked, do you know how I can power my Eventide time factor from a power supply? It's been giving me a lot of problems.
What's the power supply, I guess is my question. Because typically, if it's one of the newer power supplies, it's, half an amp, 500 milliamps, shouldn't have an issue powering it. I don't remember what the exact current is on there, but I'm pretty sure it's somewhere around 500. So you shouldn't have an issue with one of those. And then if it's like a one spot or something like that, that might be a little cutting it close. Or you'd need a dedicated one spot just for it. But I think I remember on those Eventides, it's a 2.5 millimeter barrel instead of a 2.1. So you'd have to get either an adapter or resolder it with a different barrel size. Let's see. All right. Do you have more details on the blubber wahs? Any specific years, Maxon or Ivan? Philip Sace, we had done kind of like a wah tasting session where I just brought in a bunch of different wahs, and he brought in a bunch of his vintage wahs, and I was just trying to kind of calibrate what is the best sound to go for and what era in particular. And he had hit me to the blubber wah at that meeting. And the thing I really like about it, other than it just sounds great, is that the die casting on it is so lightweight. It weighs probably half of what a normal wah weighs, but it looks exactly the same. So they sound great, they look like a cool vintage wah, and they're super lightweight. The only downside is they don't have a power jack, so if you needed to have it on a pedal board, you'd have to add that feature to it. But and it's not true bypass, so you'd have to do that too. But they're really cool wahs. They sound great, very vintage, very short throw. And that's how a lot of the old ones, where they didn't have this really wide sweep. It was like very narrow. Like you can't even physically or mechanically move it very far comparatively. And that's how a lot of those old wahs are. If you have a old V846 or Clyde McCoy, they're going to be like that too. What do we got?
So 1224 Riley asks, or says, so I'm looking to get into pedals, but individual pedals are expensive.
Mm-hmm.
What is a good multi-effects pedal or pedal board?
I don't know if I have any recommendations there.
We got the Ibanez one.
Oh yeah, there's an Ibanez one. There is an Ibanez unit called I forget what it's called. Is it UE 300 or something like that? We'll grab it. I'll show you what it looks like. I'll grab it. But it's like, in fact, actually, this goes for everybody. If you want a good deal on a vintage tube screamer, you got to get one of these Ibanez multi-effects units, because the circuit boards inside of them are from the TS-808. But it's almost like Ibanez had this like batch of old PC boards, and they couldn't put them in the TS9 enclosure, and so they put them in this thing. Here it is, the UE 300. This thing is an awesome multi-effect. So what it has like a master on off. It has a stereo chorus, which is from the 808 era choruses in here. Then it has the actual tube screamer, which has, if you open it up, it has a TS-808 PC board here, and then it has a compressor limiter in here, which is super cool. And I think the order's compressor, tube screamer, stereo chorus. It's got stereo out on here. This is a great multi-effects thing, and I get an all analog multi-effects unit. Definitely check out the UE 300. Alright. Let's see. Alright, John Matthews. Is an Empress buffer appropriate for the effects loop, or is a specific type of buffer needed? This is a good question. Good buffer question. So, with regard to effects loops, most effects loops now are buffered, at least on the send. But the place where it wouldn't make any sense for them to be buffered is on the return. So if you were going to buffer an effects loop, I would only really worry about buffering the return, because unless you wanted to put a buffer like right from the send on your amp, it doesn't really make sense. You're gonna have that one cable going send into the the first pedal. Let's say it's a delay, and then delay is presumably going to be on. Then it goes into a reverb, presumably going to be on, and then you have to drive that long cable going back to the effects loop. That's where you'd want to put the buffers on the output going back to the return. So you would just need an output buffer. So one that might work would either be like the SUR buffer, which is a pretty small compact buffer, and it's got an ISO'd out as well if you needed to do any weird splitting things, but that wouldn't be appropriate here for the effects loop. Or you could use something like the Mesa Boogie Clear Link, which is like the output section of the high wire buffer that I recommended in some of my other videos. So that would be a consideration. Both those buffers, I think the Clear Link and the SUR buffer, are kind of in the low $100 ranges, and that would just go again on the return from the last pedal in your effects loop back to your amplifier. That'd be the place to put the buffer. All right, what do we got?
So Dre Batista asks, how about a series of videos with DIY tips to modify Boss pedals?
I feel like you'd want to go to the source on that one. Like, I'm not an expert, or I didn't pioneer any mods to Boss effects pedals. I would talk to Uncle Rob Keeley about that and see if he'd do it, because he's really the guy that him and Analog Man are really the guy that pioneered that stuff. I mean, I could show you some basic stuff, but that's not really what I'm known for, really what I do. I feel like you should go to the source. Those guys could explain, circles around me about, things that they found, because I'm not doing that and listening for a specific sound. Or I could tell you board thing, I could definitely help you. If it's about my pedals, I could definitely help you. But when it comes to like specific mods to pedals, and those guys kind of wrote the book on how to do that sort of stuff, and why they make choices like that to mod certain things, change certain values. Those are the pioneers of the Boss pedal mods. Let's see. What's your opinion on using PowerCon for pedals? So PowerCon is just a if you're not I don't know, at a church or doing front of house stuff, it's just a type of connector. I don't have anything against using PowerCon, but none of the power supplies use it, so we're pretty much using IEC unless you as the protocol for the power cables. But I mean, technically it's a better connection. But any time you see locking connections like that, you have to remember that there's no relief. Just like when you see locking connectors on interfaces or patch bays that people have on their pedal boards, if you don't have any relief, when somebody kicks that cable, which will happen invariably, you're going to have a broken jack every time. Where if it's a standard jack, it at least is going to have some relief. The cable's going to release. You might lose connection, but you're not going to have a broken jack. So I kind of feel like a lot of those locking systems, in certain places are good. I think if you're powering a stage wedge or something like that, and some sort of powered monitor, I get it. But on a pedal board, I don't know that I think it necessitates that. So I'm not against it, but I don't know that it might be kind of like an overreaction to something that's really not going to help you that much. If somebody really does come by and kick your cable for your power to your rig, I think it's better that you have something that can release than something that's going to lock on and it's going to potentially either break the cable or break the connector. So, Instagram.
What is your recommended wah pedal and volume pedal?
Okay, wah pedal. Well, I think that of the ones that are available now, the best built one is the full tone. It's the best built. Now, whether you like the sound of that, I can't speak for you. I think it sounds pretty good, but it is the best built. But it doesn't look like a traditional wah, so some people freak out for that reason. Best sounding wah, for me, I really like the Buddha wahs that were manufactured by Dunlop, but sold through Buddha amplifiers. In particular, the ones that were made while Buddha was in the city of Petaluma, and you can see that by the bottom plate, and it'll say that it was made in Petaluma, or it'll say like Buddha Amplification, Petaluma, California. Those are really great sounding wahs. There are no frills. It's very simple. Has a purple bass. Looks very traditional. Has a chrome top. those are some of the best sounding wahs I've ever come across, and a lot of guys still use them that are really kind of in the funk thing, like Paul Jackson Jr. and guys like that. I really like those, and those can be had really inexpensively. We also talked earlier about the blubber wah. If you want a real vintage wah, I mean that pretty much is a vintage, style, Clyde McCoy, Vox V846 kind of era style wah, and nobody really knows about them. They were made in Japan, kind of sleeper wahs. They sound really great, but they do need some mods in order to kind of make them usable on a current rig. And I think that was the whole question, right? Oh, volume pedal. Okay, best built volume pedal, Lely is the best built. Whether you like the sound of it, it's a different thing. The tapers are the real issue that a lot of people have with volume pedals, because every one of them, the pot tapers differently, so it depends on like whether you want more change in evenly throughout the sweep, or whether you want kind of a bigger sweet spot in the middle. I think that the ones that I like the sweep of a lot are the Boss FV300, which is like 2 generations ago of Boss volume pedals. But they're really big and kind of cumbersome, so a lot of people don't like them. Another one that's pretty good is the Dunlop Volume X, and they have like a magnetic strip, so there's very little tension on it. But I think volume pedals are tricky because you have weight on them all the time, and they have a lot of movement, and just the mechanics of them don't hold up really well over time. So even on the best built volume pedals, you're still going to have issues mechanically with them over time, and it's sort of unavoidable. So you kind of have to choose them all with a grain of salt. But again, best built, definitely the Lely. Best taper, I think, is the Boss FV300. I've used all of them. I also use the Dunlop Volume X. It kind of just depends on what the situation is. Sometimes sizing plays a factor in the choice that I make on a rig-to-rig basis. So that's that. All right, let's see. Is an effects loop necessary for using the timeline? No. In fact, I wouldn't recommend using a timeline in an effects loop. I don't think for most amps, it doesn't do great at line level. And there are some effects loops that allow you to adjust the input and output level of the effects loop so that you could use stuff like that in there. But no, I don't think it does great in an effects loop typically. One that I really like in the effects loop, we talked about the H9 a little earlier, but I also really like the TC Nova delay. It works really, really well in an effects loop, so that's a consideration for people that are looking for really good quality delays for effects loops.
What pedal do you have cooking next?
Well, I can tell you that I know it will be popular based on its big brother. So that's the most I can say at this point. Let's see, back here. What is your favorite amp for blues-oriented rock? Blues-oriented rock. Well, I think that the two rocks are really well built. The new, I just played their newest one, the Sterling Signature or something like that. It was a 100-watt kind of steel string singer type amplifier, and that sounded really great. But those have a pretty good price tag, so it is an investment. I think it's worth it, but it depends on what your budget is. And if you just want something that's really great pedal platform to play blues stuff, I really like the vintage Fender stuff. You can get those inexpensively, a couple $100, $500 for a blackface Bandmaster. Those are great deals. So I'd say something like that is a really good one too if you didn't want to spend a lot of money. Let's take a couple more and then we'll wrap up.
So someone asks, can't afford a vintage fuzz face. What will get me close without going over $200?
Over $200. The Chase Tone 68 fuzz. I used it on a rig pretty recently that there's got to be pictures floating around of. That was a great fuzz for the money, and I think that they're like 180 maybe. They sound really good. The Chase Tone, I think it's called like the 68 fuzz. It's kind of in a red powder coat, kind of a vein style powder coating, kind of similar to what like an older fuzz face would look like, but it's in a more traditional kind of Hammond style box. Those are great, and I think that they're under $200, so I'd say check that one out. Let's see. Would an H9 sound good even out of an effects loop? Also, what do you think of NYC Pedalboards? Would you do a build for a client with one? The H9 sound good. Yeah, they sound good out of an effects loop. You don't need to, but they work great in an effects loop. If you do need to place it there, it's not going to be as sensitive as a lot of the other kind of multi-effects products that are really designed more for instrument level. I don't know anything about NYC Pedalboards, so I can't answer that question. All right, let's take one more from Insta, one more from YouTube.
Alright. So, someone asks about the real echo. The
Oh, our
delay.
delay.
Like, what's going on with that?
What's going on with that? Okay, so for those of you that don't know, this is a tape echo pedal that we brought to a few NAMMs. It's a emulation of a tape echo, but it's not digital. It's not modeling. It actually is totally a mechanical echoplex, and just kind of making it as close to a 1-to-1 as an EP3, the solid state echoplex. The place where it is right now is it is incredibly expensive, even to make one. I think the one that we took, I think it was about $800, and that didn't include any time. That was just like in parts, and obviously making one unit's expensive, but if I can't make it for the same price as, say, an El Capistan, I don't think it has a chance to survive in the market, because I think if it's too high priced, it's just not going to be practical, even though the size is ostensibly the same as any other Vertex product. I think that we need to figure out how to get the price point under $400, and even now, making it in, say, quantities of 500 or 1,000, I'd still be struggling to hit that mark. So I think for now, I'm not considering it as a realistic or probable contender for a future product. I think it'd just be too. I think it'd be too expensive to justify the investment, and I don't think, with the way the delays are going now, I don't know how many people would want it, because the trend is really kind of Swiss Army knife, multi-effects. You can't have a mechanical delay like an Echoplex have a tap tempo. Like you can't do any of that stuff. It's very simple. It's like 3 knobs and the truth. That's all you get. Let's go back to Instagram. Let's see. All right, last one. I have a Mojo Vibe. This is a Bob Sweet vibe pedal. It's really cool. And the pedal, it cuts out when it's not engaged. I opened it up and it looks good. Any thoughts? Well, it could be the foot switch if it's cutting out. That could be the problem. But it could also be, that you have dirty contacts. And sometimes you can't tell on a foot switch. It looks good, but the problem is inside. And the cool thing about those pedals, though, as I recall, is that it's pretty serviceable. Like, all the wires are dressed into the foot switch, so you could, if you know how to solder, you could pretty much just copy the foot switch, kind of 1-to-1. So you could undo the foot switch, kind of have it hanging loose, put in your new foot switch and tighten it down, and then just move one wire at a time over to the lug. Because on those foot switches, it doesn't matter where you start, as long as the orientation of the switch is the same. You don't have to know anything about the signal path. You can just pull off the wire in the top left, move it to the wire, or move it to the lug on the top left on the new foot switch. And if you have questions on what that is, I can link for you the foot switch, but you probably are going to be getting need some sort of alpha 3-pole double throw true bypass, butt contact mechanical foot switch. And I can link it for you. You can email me if you have questions about what that one is, and I can show you exactly where to get it. But I think that's it. So this is about an hour here that we did, and we'll try to get this a little bit more sorted for next week so that we can do this on a weekly basis and do some pedalboard Q&A. But thanks for all those who are watching.
Sweet.
Let me just cut it off on here. I think it just says like end stream or something like that on the YouTube side.